Anyway, but the idea is just to get out there. And,
Yeah.
Was it a tailgate time?
Yeah. I remember tailgating
transition. You know, so it's like,
you messed up.
you need to do this better and that better.
Oh, yeah.
For the rest of you when your course is happening. So, I'm not going to say she got rid of a lot. Standing waiting for her. And then maybe I'll get her. She didn't get rid of it.
Well, in regards to the driver, before the just talking about clever express side. Like, if you don't want
My finals are done.
this is the first year, like, his videos, like, the year that I have to say, so I can't go back on it. Like, I don't even think so.
Yeah. She's
Yeah. Well, that's obviously the green one.
She did. She didn't squeak at anything. She actually squeaked. So, it was good. Okay, we're down to our last 2 weeks. We've only got 6 more class periods. So we're gonna wind up exercise physiology here pretty quickly and then move into repro, and that's gonna be it. So we're gonna try to continue on with what we're talking about on Friday regarding exercise physiology. We were talking about the cardiovascular system, right? And we had talked about how it can control and direct where blood flow goes by whether the capillaries are dilated, increased blood flow, or constricted. We had mentioned that during exercise, blood flow to the muscles increases 40-fold. Gigantic increase in blood flow to the muscles. What happens with blood flow to the skin during moderate exercise? It increases. So during moderate exercise, blood flow to the skin increases. Why would that be? Help them cool down, right? Okay, to help dissipate heat. During maximal exercise, what does blood flow to the skin do?
Decreases.
Yeah, it decreases. Okay, blood flow everywhere pretty much shuts down except to the muscles. Okay, they will shunt every bit of blood to the muscles because they're devoting as much blood flow as they can to the muscles so they can perform that maximal exercise. Okay, yes, they're going to take out a big thermal heat load when exercise is done, and they're going to have to get rid of that heat, but that's how the horse operates. During maximal exercise, blood flow to the skin shuts down. Okay, something else that happens as the horse becomes more fit. Okay, so as it goes through an exercise program, we'll start to see capillaries develop in areas that didn't previously have capillaries. Okay, so we'll see more capillary development in the muscle tissue. Okay, so that exercising horse can get more blood flow to the muscles. We will also see more capillaries in the lungs. Okay, so as the horse gets more fit, we see more capillaries in the muscle and we see more capillaries in the lungs. Okay, to increase blood flow to those areas. If he's regularly using his muscles, the body recognizes the need and will synthesize basically capillaries in those tissues. If he's not fit and not exercised, it's not going to waste the resources doing that. So that's one change we see as a horse goes through an exercise program, exercising on a regular basis and becoming more fit. Okay, something else that we see happen. Okay, in a horse at rest, blood volume is about 40 liters. Okay, if you can drain all the blood out of them, you can get about 40 liters. When they start exercising, that jumps to 50 liters. Okay, how do they, in a period of a minute, maybe 2, how do they get another 10 liters of blood? Where's that coming from? The bones are not going to create 10 liters worth of blood cells Okay, the spleen in the horse, okay, show them right here, supposed to be that blue thing. Okay, so the spleen in the horse, when the horse starts exercising, the spleen will contract. And when it does that, it's going to dump a bunch of blood cells into circulation. So the job of the spleen is to filter out old blood cells, okay? So if it's filtering out old blood cells out of circulation, and it kind of hangs on to them, and then when the horse starts exercising, it contracts, and it dumps those blood cells back into circulation. Okay, so what would be the advantage of having that happen? Why does the horse do it? Okay, so more red blood cells in circulation means more hemoglobin, which means they can carry more oxygen. Okay, so when the horse starts exercising, the spleen contracts, dumps these red blood cells into circulation, increases oxygen carrying capacity. In humans, does this happen in humans? When you start exercising, does your spleen contract, dump a bunch of blood cells into circulation? It does not, but some humans try to duplicate this. Have you ever heard the term blood doping? Okay, so if someone's going to compete in a big race, they'll start bleeding themselves ahead of time, right? They'll store these blood cells right before the competition. They'll inject it back into their body. Okay, so it's their own blood, and so it's called blood doping. Shouldn't make them sick, right? Shouldn't have anything like that. However, it's illegal, okay? It's, you know, it gives you an unfair advantage, right? And so what they'll do is they'll test hematocrit on elite athletes and make sure their hematocrit levels aren't too high. In the horse, they do this naturally. So spleen contracts, dumps a bunch of red blood cells into circulation. The other thing that happens is we see some fluid shifts within the body. Okay, so fluid shifts into the bloodstream. As we get more red blood cells, that blood becomes thicker, it becomes more viscous. Okay, so there's more osmotic pull. It'll pull more fluid into the bloodstream. So that's how we see an increase of 40 to 50 liters in circulating blood once that horse starts exercising. Okay, so circulatory system, incredibly important. Respiratory system is going to play a pretty big role as well. Okay, so we all know air is going to have to come in through the nasal passages. Okay, it's going to travel down the trachea here. Okay, as we get into the lungs, these conducting airways get smaller and smaller and smaller, and we end up with bronchioles that will terminate into alveoli. Okay, and that's where the actual gas exchange is going to occur. Okay, so when we think about the lungs, we think about that. Something that a lot of times we don't really think about are the respiratory muscles. Okay, they're going to play a pretty important role as well. In humans, when we inhale, we use respiratory muscles, and when we exhale, it's totally passive. You don't have to use any muscles to exhale. It's just a passive process. In the horse, that's not the case. Okay, they're going to use their respiratory muscles to inhale and to exhale. Okay, so the horse's respiratory muscles play a very important role in terms of exercise, breathing, getting oxygen into the system. When that horse is at maximal exercise, the negative pressure coming in through that airway is equivalent to vacuum. Okay, the air is coming in incredibly fast. And something that can happen, the trachea can actually collapse because of all that negative pressure. And so that's when you see, racehorse is running and he stretches his neck out. He's trying to stiffen that trachea to keep it open. Okay? So respiratory system, nasal passages, trachea, all very important and can actually get so much negative pressure that they collapse. Okay, you guys know the function of the respiratory system is breathing and ventilation. Basically, it's to get air into the lung, down into the alveoli, which is where gas exchange occurs, and back out. Okay? The respiratory system's not going to deliver oxygen through the body. It just gets it into the lung, back out. Okay, so when we were talking about the cardiovascular system, we talked about how we measure cardiac output. How, when we're studying exercise in animal, that's one thing we're definitely about stroke volume with cardiac output. With minute ventilation, we talk about tidal volume. So stroke volume was how much blood was pumped with one heartbeat. What do you suppose tidal volume is? How much air comes in with one breath. Okay, so it's how much air comes in one breath. Okay, and the horse standing around, it's going to be somewhere around 5 or 6 liters. Okay, so the total lung capacity is 40 liters. Okay, but with each breath, they're not going to exhale every bit of air and then refill every bit of air. Okay, a normal breath, 5 to 6 liters. So we take volume times frequency. Okay, same thing whether it's cardiac output or minute ventilation. It's volume times frequency. Okay, VE stands for minute ventilation, VT is tidal volume, and FR is respiratory frequency. Just multiply them together. That tells you how much air moves into that lung in a minute. At rest, okay, if that tidal volume is about 5 liters, and he's taking about 10 breaths a minute, okay, his minute ventilation at rest is 50 liters a minute. When he starts exercising, you see a gigantic increase, okay, and it goes up to almost 2,000, okay, 1,800 liters a minute. Huge, huge increase. In the galloping horse, as they gallop, the biomechanics, the way their body's built, they take one breath with each stride. Okay? So when those front legs hit the ground, they exhale. Okay? The back legs are pushing off the ground, they inhale. Okay? So the way their body works, it forces inhalation and exhalation with every stride. Okay? So as the horse is exercising, how fast he's running dictates how fast he's breathing, because he has to take a breath with every stride. The only thing he can really change up is tidal volume. Okay? He can take a deeper breath, but he can't really change the frequency unless he changes his speed. Okay? So that's something a little bit different, a little bit unique about the horse. Okay, the number one cause of lost performance in horses is lameness, okay? Musculoskeletal problems. Number 2 are respiratory problems. Okay, so yeah, lameness is an issue in performance horses, no doubt about it. And number 2 are respiratory problems. These are significant as well. One of the conditions that we see a lot in horses, and we kind of touched on this when we talked about alfalfa, that is recurrent airway obstruction, or RAO. You may also hear this referred to as COPD or heaves. Okay, COPD in humans is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It's really not the same thing in horses, but you'll hear people refer to it as COPD. If they say that, this is what they're talking about. So what this is, it's more like the equivalent of asthma in humans. Okay, it's like a horse who's got asthma. They're really sensitive to allergens and dust in the environment. Okay, and so if you feed them dusty hay, they stick their nose in it, they inhale all that dust. You leave them in the barn while you clean stalls. You're kicking up dust. You're sweeping the barn. You're kicking up dust. You ride them in an indoor arena. They're breathing dust. Okay, really irritating to these horses. And what happens is the lungs lose elasticity. Okay, so it becomes much more difficult for that horse to inhale and exhale. And so those respiratory muscles get quite a workout. And what happens, these abdominal muscles that this horse uses to exhale, because they're working so hard all the time, they start to hypertrophy. Okay, and this is called a heave line. Okay, you see a horse who's got this big old muscle running along here, probably a heaved horse, and that's called a heave line. Okay, these horses, some of them are worse off than others, but a lot of them become fairly intolerant of exercise. When they start exercising, they'll cough a lot. They'll cough up mucus. Some of them get to the point where they cough even at rest. They kind of hold their head like this all the time, trying to get that mucus out of there. So with these horses, there's definitely an effect on performance. You can do things like down the hay, take a horse out of the barn, sweep feet, cleaning stalls, try to ride them outside versus inside. issue that's extremely common, especially in racehorses, is exercise-induced pulmonary hemorrhage, or EIPH. Okay, and these horses, you'll hear them a lot of time referred to as bleeders. Okay, he's a bleeder. So this would be a pretty severe case. A lot of times when the horse is done racing, what happens when they're racing? Blood pressure in the lungs gets sky high. Okay, blood pressure in the lungs gets really, really high. We've got these little tiny capillaries, and these really thin alveolar walls, and the capillaries rupture, and the blood has to come up. So what happens, the horse coughs up blood, or they may not even cough, but the blood's making its way up. Most of the time the horse will swallow it before you ever see it. Okay, so you don't see the blood. You have to stick an endoscope down there to see it, because most of the time it's not going to come out the nose, so swallow it before it gets to that point. Okay, so if you've got blood in the lungs, you suppose that's going to enhance performance? Probably not. Okay, and so this is an issue, this is a big issue in the racing industry. Anyone know what drug they use to treat these horses? Lasix, okay? So they use Lasix. In my exercise physiology class, we take a field trip to Oklahoma City every fall. We go to the racetrack and we'll watch the races. There'll be 8 or 9 races, you know, maybe 8 to 10 horses in each race. How many horses do you suppose? So we might see 90 horses run. How many of them do you suppose would run without Lasix? Did you pay any attention last year? Oh, you did go, that's right. You generally, if you look through the program, because they have to tell you whether they're on Lasix, out of those 90 head, you might find 1 or 2 that aren't on Lasix. Okay, so almost every horse that runs will be on Lasix. So it's allowed here. You can use it. What it is diuretic. Okay, so you give them this diuretic before the race, give it to them earlier in the day. They will urinate a lot. They will get rid of a lot of fluid. Okay, by getting rid of all that fluid, blood volume decreases. And the idea is that there's going to be less pressure in the lungs. Okay, less blood, less pressure. So you give them this diuretic. They urinate, blood pressure goes down, and the idea is that they'll bleed less. So, you know, you could argue that it's, you know, in terms of animal welfare, it's good for the horse, it helps the horse, you know, we don't want them bleeding, so this is a good thing to do. However, in most other countries, Lasix is not allowed. Why wouldn't they allow it? What's that? Okay, so maybe some concern about dehydration. And a lot of times along with this, they'll give them Lasix and they will withhold water. So yeah, they're a little dehydrated. So there could be some concern with that. Why else wouldn't you want to allow Lasix? When they get rid of all that water, what do you suppose happens to their weight? It goes down. Do you suppose that might give them a competitive advantage? People would say yes. If you get rid of an extra 100 pounds, they should run faster, right? And so some people argue it gives you a competitive advantage. And so you shouldn't be able to use it. Other people would say if everybody can use it, it's really not an advantage. Now, horses in the U.S. that run on Lasix, they are supposed to be determined to be a bleeder by a veterinarian. Okay, and the vet's supposed to just prescribe the Lasix. So you're not supposed to be able to just take any horse and put it on Lasix just because you want to. Okay, they're supposed to be confirmed bleeders, but like I said, almost every horse on the track will run with it. So it's a little bit controversial. Some people think if they need this, if they need Lasix to run, then we're running them too hard and they're not made to do that, we shouldn't be doing that. So it's pretty controversial. Here in the United States, they run on it all the time. Other countries, it's not allowed. But what they're addressing is this issue of bleeders. So certainly something that they deal with a lot on the racetrack. Do other competition events use Lasix? Other horses? Anyone know anyone who uses Lasix and any other kind of horse? Barrel horses. Yeah, I just saw an ad posted the other day for a barrel horse for sale. It said runs on Lasix. Yeah, barrel horses will use it. Generally, you're going to see it more in horses who are sprinting, running really hard. You're not going to probably see it in a Western pleasure horse or trail riding horse. Okay, so in those alveoli, okay, this is where gas exchange is occurring. The lung is going to bring air into the alveoli. Okay, but then we've got to have capillaries there in order for that gas exchange to occur. So something that we look at is called ventilation perfusion matching. So what we will do, or what scientists will do, is they'll look at how many of those alveoli actually have capillaries around them. Okay, because some of them don't. And as the horse becomes more fit and more capillaries are synthesized, we will see better matching with our ventilation and perfusion. Because it's kind of a waste to bring air into an alveoli with no capillaries around it, because no gas exchange will occur. So as it becomes more fit, it develops more capillaries, becomes more efficient at getting oxygen into the system. Okay? One thing that we have to be cognizant of is that this gas exchange occurs through passive diffusion. Okay? We don't have a transporter in here who grabs that oxygen and pulls it across the membrane. Okay? It's just passive diffusion. And there's nothing we can do really to change how fast that occurs. We've got our deoxygenated blood that comes in. Okay? Carbon dioxide is high in the blood, not so much in the alveoli, so carbon dioxide diffuses into the alveoli. Okay, our oxygen is high in the lungs, not so much in the bloodstream, so it will diffuse into the bloodstream. There's nothing we can really do to speed that up. Now things can happen to slow it down if you've got a bunch of mucus in here or something that causes this membrane to be thicker. That will slow your diffusion, but there's not much we can do to speed it up. It's a passive process. Oh, okay. So we've done cardiovascular, we've done respiratory. Another area that exercise physiologists look at is the area of biomechanics. Okay, so when we talk about biomechanics, we're evaluating the structures involved in movement. Okay, so we're really studying the way the horse moves. Okay, and we'll look at the phases of the gait. Okay, we'll look at the walk, we'll look at the trot, we'll look at the left leg canter, right leg canter, gallop. Okay, we'll look at maneuvers, how they jump fences. Okay, and we'll study how do they use their legs, how do they use their neck, how do they use their tail. You can look at all the different parts of their body and see how they use it as they perform these gaits or perform these maneuvers. Okay, so things that will affect the way they move. Conformation. We've already talked about that, some of that. You know, a splay-footed horse, you know, wing in. Pigeon-toed horse, you know, paddle. The rider has a pretty big impact. And there have been more studies recently looking at the impact of rider. An experienced rider versus an inexperienced rider, the size of the rider, looking at all kinds of different things. But for sure, the rider can affect the way the horse moves. Okay, footing will have an impact. Deep footing is going to make that horse pick his feet up a little higher and work a little harder. And pain. If the horse is in pain, for sure that changes the way they move. They limp, they start to compensate, they favor one leg. So those things will all affect the way the horse moves. Okay, something that's unique about the horse that will impacts the way it performs are that the forelimbs, the front legs, are attached to the trunk only by muscles and ligaments. Okay, so how are your forelimbs attached to your body? What do you have right here? Collarbone or clavicle, right? Okay, the horse does not have a collarbone, it does not have a clavicle. So what it's got is a whole bunch of muscles around here. They're collectively referred to as sling muscles. Okay, they form kind of a sling here that holds that thorax between the front legs. So as a result, does the horse have greater or less mobility in their front legs compared to us. They're gonna have a whole lot less. They can't go this way, right? They only go frontwards and backwards, okay? Because they've got these muscles holding these forelimbs in here. Whereas we've got our clavicle, we can swing them out all different directions. So the horse is gonna have, it's strictly front back, that's it. The other thing that these sling muscles do, you can actually train a horse, and they do this, they really focus on it in dressage horses, to contract those sling muscles. And what that will actually do, they can actually raise their withers relative to their front legs. Okay, so a horse that's really collected can contract those sling muscles, raise the withers, and push its hind end up underneath itself. Okay, one who doesn't, you're gonna say he's down in his withers. The withers are, he doesn't ever lift them up. So, sling muscles going to affect the way the horse moves. Okay, one real big advancement in terms of exercise physiology was when we got the ability with cameras to take a series of very rapid photographs and be able to study the phases of the game. You know, you watch a horse and you use your eye, you think you know what's going on, and until you can take those pictures and study them, it's pretty hard to really determine exactly what's happening because it's so fast. So Edward Woodbridge was one of the pioneers in this field, and he did a lot of this work. So here's a horse galloping, and you can see the different phases of the stride. Now, one thing we know is that the forelimbs, okay, the front legs bear most of the weight, most of the concussion. Okay, even when the horse is standing still, the forelegs are going to support how much of the horse's weight? As a percentage. 60%. Okay, he's got that head and neck hanging out on the front end, and so the front legs are going to bear more weight. The other thing that the front legs will do, so when this horse is galloping, okay, the forward momentum and the forward propulsion is coming from the hind legs. Okay, they're providing the forward propulsion. He reaches up here, he pushes off with these hind legs, and he pushes himself forward. Okay, what the front leg's going to do, when this front leg strikes the ground, it actually slows him down. Okay, but really the function of the front legs is just to keep the front end up so he doesn't fall on his face. Okay, it's kind of like a wheelbarrow. When you push the wheelbarrow, the wheel doesn't provide any forward impulsion, it just keeps it up, right? You are providing the forward impulsion. Same thing with the horse. The back legs provide all the forward impulsion. The front legs act like a brake and then just keep him from falling on his face. They just keep him upright until the back legs can hit again and push him forward again. So these front legs act as a brake, and there are points during the stride when that horse's entire body is supported on one front leg. Okay, so it's acting like a brake, it's slowing down. You got 1,200 pounds coming down the rail at 35 miles an hour, and that one front leg is going to try to slow all that weight down and hold it up. So lots of concussion, lots of wear and tear on the front legs. Okay, before we had the ability to take these pictures and really study the stride, people thought that they knew there was a moment when the horse was suspended in the air. Okay, he's galloping along, they knew there was a period when he was suspended in the air. They used to think that it was when all the legs were spread out. So if you look at old paintings of horses, they all look like this. They've got their front legs forward and their back legs back. That's not really how they move, and we know that now. And so now, if you look at paintings of horses running, this is what they look like. Because that period of suspension is actually when the legs are all up underneath. So, kind of interesting. Okay, so we've got that head and neck hanging out on the front end. Okay, because of that, the front legs take a lot more concussion, but also they're going to use the head and neck for balance. Okay, in your cutting horse, they're going to swing that head and neck back and forth and help them move back and forth. In your jumpers, they're going to use that head, they're going to pick it up as they jump, and they're going to use it as they go over the fence. Before they land, they're going to pull that head back to slow the rotation. Okay, so head and neck's really important in the horse in terms of balance and helping to aid that athleticism. Okay, head and neck, lots of flexibility, lots of ability to move it up, down, side to side. not so much for the spine, okay? The trunk on the horse is pretty rigid. From the withers back to the tail, we don't see a whole lot of movement. And you'll hear people say, bend him around the circle, bend him around the barrel. The reality is he doesn't have a lot of ability to do that. He can bend his head and neck, for sure, side to side, up and down. But between the withers and tail, not a lot of ability to bend. They've tried to look at this, and here are the degrees of motion for the neck. You can see very high degree of motion. Move that neck up and down, and move it side to side. Do great. But when you look at in between the vertebrae, very little movement in between each individual vertebrae. Now, if you get a little tiny bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, you can get a little, there's some in the horse. If we go down the whole thing, but it's still not going to get a lot of bend there. Most of the other motion occurs right here at the lumbosacral joint, which is where the lumbar vertebrae join with the sacrum. And the sacrum's where they're all fused together. So in your bucking horse, right, when it seems like he breaks in half, most of that's occurring right there. Okay, the advantage of this really rigid trunk is that it allows those hind legs, which are providing the impulsion, providing the power, they can transfer that power forward. If you think about a spaghetti noodle, when it's raw and it's stiff, you push on the back end, right? The front end moves forward. You cook it and it's soft and limp, and you push on the back end, nothing happens to the front end, right? Same idea here. If you have a really stiff trunk, a stiff spine, it's easy to push that momentum forward, okay? So the hind legs provide the power, the stiff trunk allows that power to continue through the body. Okay, so there are companies that actually make a lot of money doing gait analyses, and I'm going to play this video here for you. And they're predicting racehorse success based on the way they move. And it's really kind of interesting.
This video demonstrates the value of slow motion films at 2-year-old and training auctions of thoroughbred racehorses. The 5 horses shown were all bought at the same auction by a well-respected, experienced horseman who buys millions of dollars of young racehorses every year, including the most expensive horse at this select, well-known auction in 2001. This Glitterman colt sold for $72,000. His left front leg curled more than average, at times appearing to hit his elbow. Once the horse attains racing speeds and has that momentum, the motion of the limbs consumes the most energy. Inefficiency in this area is worth noting. Extraneous limb motion can also have soundness consequences. This explosive red colt sold for $15,000. His front legs winged out in a looping pattern that was clearly evident on the slow motion films, especially after he changed leads. These kinds of inefficiencies at racing speeds are often unpredictable from the confirmation and the walk you'll see back at the barn, which may seem perfect.
See that? You never see that with the naked eye.
This Thunder Gulch colt sold for $270,000 and was the sale topper. He had good action. There was some extraneous motion in his left front leg. This Smoke Black filly sold for $24,000. She used a rotary gallop for several strides in the middle of her workout. That's when the footfall pattern sequence of legs used goes around the horse in a circle. This is how horses change lead, and a common way for them to accelerate, especially out of the starting gate. Young, inexperienced horses often stay a rotary gallop for an extended number of strides after changing leads. While there's nothing wrong with this gait pattern, it is not at all representative of what will be a horse's racing action, and that's important for a potential buyer to know. Without slow motion film, this pattern can be hard to spot, even for an expert.
Okay, so on a normal gallop, so on these horses here, what was happening is they would strike the ground with their right hind, left front, right front. That's the pattern she's using. So she's going right, left, left, right, right, left, left, right. On a normal horse, it should be right, left, left. Okay, so the cadence, the rhythm, she's all messed up in the way she's using her legs. And as she gets more experience, she may quit doing that. Now here, she's went ahead and finished changing leads.
This Pentelicus colt sold for $29,000. His right foreleg hit his right rear leg especially hard at one point, causing him to drag his foreleg forward. These problems can sometimes be fixed, but there is the additional risk of starting out with such problems, especially if there are other horses the buyer is equally interested in.
examples on there. If you guys ever want to go online and check that out, you certainly can. But it just goes to show, you know, there's a lot of things that you would never catch with the naked eye. You just can't see them. But if you were going to go buy a racehorse and you wanted to pay this company some money, they'd video it for you, they'd analyze it, they'd put it in slow motion, and then you can make your buying decision based on what they find. And as you can see, the horses they found to have good action brought more money than those who didn't. So just, you know, one way that this is actually used by the industry. Okay, we also have issues with thermoregulation in the exercising horse. Okay? The biggest determinant of, aside from how much work the horse does, is going to be climate. Okay? So that includes temperature and humidity. Okay? The hotter and more humid it is, the harder the horse is going to have to work to get rid of all that extra heat. Okay? The other factor that goes into it is how hard is the horse working. Okay? There's a direct relationship between oxygen used and heat generated. The more oxygen they use, the more heat they generate. So the harder they're working, they're using more oxygen, they're going to generate more heat. Okay, other factors that go into that would be wind, as well as shade. Okay, so if the horse is overheating, you know, we can use things like put them in the shade, put a fan on them to help get rid of that heat. Wind and shade will both help dissipate heat. Footing, okay? What kind of footing is going to create more heat within the horse? Hard or soft? Which one's going to make that horse work harder? Soft. Okay, so really deep sand, deep footing, the horse is going to have to work harder, he's going to generate more heat. Okay, so we've talked a couple times about how deep footing makes him work harder. Why don't we just ride him on a hard surface all the time? And we've got more concussion, right? Okay, so a hard surface puts more concussion on the joints, that cartilage, right? Soft footing makes the horse work harder and puts more stress on the soft tissues, tendons and ligaments. Okay, so it's a trade-off. So we generally are going to aim for something kind of in the middle. It's soft, it provides a little cushion, but it's not really deep. Okay, so the horse's primary mechanism of getting rid of extra heat is by sweating. Okay, the horse sweats more than any other mammal. They sweat a lot. Okay, so they need lots of electrolytes in their diet, they need lots of water. But if your primary mechanism of getting rid of heat is sweating, from a climatic standpoint, what's going to be the biggest factor that affects how well sweating cools you? Is it going to be temperature, humidity, wind, humidity? Okay, humidity is the biggest factor. If it's really humid, sweating just does not work very well. Okay, so that horse is going to sweat and sweat and sweat, and he's still not going to be able to cool himself. Okay, so when the Olympics were in Georgia, okay, this was a huge concern for all these international horses coming in who were not used to that level of humidity. Okay, they did a lot in terms of trying to put up cooling stations, misters, fans, things to keep these horses from overheating because they were not acclimated to that. And, you know, horses that live in a really hot, humid environment, we talked about anhydrosis, becomes an issue there as well. That humidity is really pretty hard on them. Okay, we've also talked about blood flow to the skin, going to play a really important role in thermal regulation. In moderate exercise, blood flow to the skin increases considerably, but during intense exercise, it actually is going to shut down. Okay, so if we're all out sprinting that horse, not a lot of blood flow to the skin. The rest of the time, yes, there is, and that's going to help carry the heat from the muscle to the skin where hopefully it can escape. Okay, on the other end of the spectrum, what if it's really cold out? Does that create issues? Well, it does to some extent. One, if it's cold and we're going to use this horse, we need to give it a better warm-up, a more thorough warm-up. We need to warm those muscles up. What happens to enzyme activity as the horse warms up? Does enzyme activity increase or decrease? It's going to increase. Enzyme activity increases when enzymes warm up. So enzyme activity will increase and he'll generate more ATP. So he needs a better warm-up when it's really cold out. Okay, other issues we have when it's really cold would be footing. Okay, we see more musculoskeletal injuries when it's cold. And part of that has to do with the footing. So snow. Is snow a problem in terms of horses' feet and legs? What happens when there's a lot of snow out and your horse is trying to walk around? And yeah, they get these snow balls that build up under their hooves, right? The snow packs into their hooves and they get these balls and they're trying to walk around on these big balls of snow. Okay, that's a really good way for them to essentially twist an ankle, okay, to use an analogy. So, big balls of snow under the feet, not good. There's special shoes you can put on to try to help prevent that. If it's icy, okay, they're slipping, they're sliding, potential for injury there. If it's muddy, okay, they're sinking into that mucky mire, slippery, sliding around, potential for injury there too. So in the winter, they need a better warm up, and we have to be really careful about footing. Okay, their energy requirements will also increase. Okay, as temperatures get colder, they need more energy in their diet just to maintain body condition. So if we're going to work these horses in the winter, and as temperatures get colder and colder and colder, we need to increase energy in the diet more and more. So that's something else. As temperatures get colder, we're going to have to provide more energy to the horse. If we want to provide more heat, what was the best feed source to do that? Hay or grain? Which one generates more heat? Digestion of hay or grain? Hay. Yep. Okay, so if we want to generate more heat, we can give them more hay. But if we want to if we're more concerned about the energy component, then you can give them a concentrate, some sort of grain. Okay, so in terms of exercise physiology, some things we use in studying exercise in horse. Okay, one would be a breathing mask. Okay, to look at the gases coming in, the gases coming out, the forces at which those gases move in and out. Okay, that's obviously going to shed a lot of information in terms of respiratory system and overall metabolism, muscle function. Okay, heart monitor. We use a lot of heart monitors, looking at what heart rate does during exercise, during recovery, related to intensity of exercise. If you take exercise physiology, we'll use some of these on horses. You know, they're pretty simple. We've got a monitor that attaches to the girth, okay, and then a little watch that tells you heart rate. We can use ECGs to look at rhythms in the heart, okay, how the heart is depolarizing. We can use it to estimate heart size. We can measure heart rate by hand. We talked about this when we were talking about health. Limitation here, the horse has to be standing still, right? We can't really take its heart rate as it's galloping around the track. Okay, stethoscope can also be used to get heart rate. Again, you can go down to Walgreens and buy one for $15. Okay, so lots of different ways to get a heart rate. Okay, we can use blood tests. Blood tests have limited usefulness. We actually don't use these a whole lot. There are only a few things that are really very meaningful. One, we can look at PCD. What's PCD? What's that stand for? Packed cell volume. Good. So packed cell volume. What this is, if we put blood in a tube, we spin it, put it in a centrifuge, spin it, the red blood cells will go to the end, okay, and then we've got our serum here. That will, by looking at this, we can estimate how many red blood cells there are in circulation. You know, with this, we might say 35%. Okay, this horse has a 35% hematocrit, and the PCD is 35%. When that horse starts exercising, it's going to look like this. It's going to jump to about 70. Why does that happen? Spleen, right? Spleen is contracting, dumping those red blood cells into circulation. Easy to see, easy to monitor. Okay, we'll hit this one last one. The other thing we can do is measure lactic acid, okay? The less fit a horse is, the sooner we'll see lactic acid accumulate. So we can use that as an indicator of fitness as well. You guys have a great one. We'll see you on Wednesday.